Hand it over to Chris to walk you through the details of the proposal.
Thank you.
Good evening. Nice to see everybody. As it was mentioned, this project involves the grading up of the Crescent Road, that is the current drop-off at the campus. This is the main building of the now Iona University campus. I was the architect for Concordia for about 12 years. I know the campus very well. I've done a lot of work in Bronxville. I was a partner over at Peter Gisolfi Associates, who did this building, the major renovations to this building, including this room here. And I know the campus very well. I've done a number of projects there, including the parking, a number of renovations. And what struck me when joining for this project was to include it in the same vocabulary of the existing historic building while not making an overt statement that would be garish to the surrounding neighbors. So what we wanted to do was include the same materials that are on the building, including the cast stone. What is limestone there, we would be using a cast stone that matches that for the cap of that seat wall, and kind of emphasize the initial idea of creating a plaza right outside that entrance. So that main entrance to that building has 4 risers to get into the building. That's roughly 24 inches of rise between the paving area and the entrance, the door sill. So to get that 24 inches, what we are proposing is to regrade the perimeter road, that Crescent Road, from the side walkways. So you can see the 2 arcades there that connect to that you could walk through, the pedestrian arcades at the north and south. From that break point where that pedestrian intersection is to the center road would be regraded. Right now it's generally flat. There's no elevation change, roughly. And so to get that sloped up, we do not need any ramps. We do not need any railings. It's a 4% grade change to grade up to get that 24 inches of rise. That then creates a center plaza that we are extending out from that center area where the cheek walls are, the existing brick cheek walls, and going to be paving that in a nicer material. The end of that plaza would be a small seat wall. From the plaza side, it would only be an 18-inch seat wall, so you'd have that kind of as a terminus there from the plaza side, which would give that a little bit of a sense of an outdoor room, so that if you come out of the building from a meeting or if there's some gathering of students, they feel a little bit of an enclosure there with the 2 small trees that are existing and the seat wall. On the opposite side of that seat wall, you can see here, we're leaving it to an existing grade. That lawn, we would have a small ground cover area in front of it, but that existing topography stays at the same elevation, which means we have the 18 inches of seat wall plus the 24 inches of rise that we've created to make that entrance ADA accessible, which creates a 3'6" face of wall there. And on that face of wall is what you see here on that detail, which is a cast stone cap. That cast stone is to match the same color and finish of the existing limestone on the building. The brick would match the same blend. We're actually bringing it out a brick fabricator, a manufacturer of clay brick, a historic clay brick, to match the same blend and color and style of the brick on the building. And then we would have, behind the letters is the same cast stone. So we have a dark bronze lettering for those letters. Those are 16-inch letters. And then behind those dark bronze letters, they would be set on a cast stone panels behind as well. So you have a clean face behind the letters instead of the brick. That's essentially the project. We're looking to beautify that campus. Unfortunately, for a number of years, it was neglected, and I think Iona's doing an excellent job coming in to revitalize this campus to be what really bring it to all of its potential.
And do you have any artist renderings of what
I do. I thought
like?
it was in that packet there.
This one isn't right there.
It's just that, is that the only one? Is it,
I
yeah.
think so.
Okay,
other than the
yeah.
schematic.
Where is
Yeah.
the handicap accessible going to be? I couldn't find that on this.
So,
I see the wall.
so this door here, currently you need 4 steps to get up,
Yep. I see
right?
that.
And from here to here, it's relatively flat.
That's why you're doing the grade.
Existing. So what we're doing is we're going to demolish and repave the sidewalk so that it gradually rises up to that elevation, so that there's no steps to get in.
4 steps are gone.
4
Got
steps
it.
are gone.
So I was looking on the side to see how you would get a handicapped in there.
Right.
So it
Right.
goes, so this 4 steps is the height of the peak of the, got it.
Right here. And so this will just gradually slope down and then meet existing paving by the time we get to the crosswalks that are here and here.
And how much elevation is it? What's 4 steps equal?
4 steps, we laser leveled that to get the elevations.
No, but what does that equal, 4 steps?
4 steps is 24 inches, 6-inch steps. And so at 4%, you need roughly, if I'm calculating it correctly, 1 foot at 4% is 20 feet, so you need 40 feet. And we have about 60 to get to here. So, I'm sorry, we have 50 to get to here, so we're just under 4%. Once you're over 5% in rise, you need to add railings and all the ADA accessible measures.
And with just 4% rise, is there any other signage or markings on the road that need to be provided that there is that grade, or
No.
just regular pavement?
Honestly, most roads, most pathways lie between 5 and 1%. Actually, the minimum slope that you would ever encounter on any driveway is 2%. So 3.8%, which is what we're roughly showing here, it's hardly noticeable because it's stretched over a long distance. And no one would ever do a ramp. If you are doing a handicap ramp with railings, no one ever does it at 5%. They always do it at 8.2%, which is the maximum.
And is there any changes to the drainage plans, or you just use the existing grates that are in the
Existing grade, so
plan?
there's a grate, it's hard to see on the plan. It's on the grading plan there, if we zoomed all the way out. There's one there that's reset, and that's only capturing the plaza, and that's all it's capturing at the moment. And if we zoom all the way out, there you'll see on the very top of right, you see one called out, and the bottom right, there's one called out as well. Those are existing. That's beyond the paving that we're doing on this project, and we're not increasing impervious surface at all on the project. So all of this is existing impervious surface, we're not increasing. So the catchment area is all the same.
And the material for this new area, are you changing the existing design? I've seen it, that it was kind of stamped, whatever, but
It's
is
stamped
it,
concrete right now. Blocks are stamped concrete. We would be going to a cleaner brushed concrete with a saw-cut scored joint. So it would be a much more uniform sidewalk, which whenever you have stamped concrete, if you ever have to replace a panel, you never match the pattern exactly. And it actually stands out more than if it was just a standard brushed concrete. So we're switching the sidewalks to a brushed concrete, which is brushed to the edge. It's a very uniform look. We've done it at a number of campuses, and it looks excellent. The roadway would be asphalt and repaved in new asphalt. That's no change there. And then the plaza would be a concrete paver for that plaza area.
Mr. Hayden?
I like the idea of the gradual grade instead of a ramp on the front, because I think those can be, necessary, but somewhat
it's an
unsightly. Yeah, it seems like a good solution.
Thank you.
And then you create that slope, and you're sort of filling it in with the, partly anyway, with the seating
And we looked at a number, with the renovations going on in the building here, we looked at a number of options to try and get ADA accessibility into the building. And the front door is actually really the only option to get that accessibility. Each door, there's two from the side, one side here at the arcades here, all immediately lead into steps.
Oh,
You open the door and you're at a half level. And so you have steps down, you have steps up. The only one that has an adjacent location that could host a chair lift or an elevator is this door here.
Are there other buildings on the campus that you're gonna have to do handicap accessible to?
We haven't analyzed the other buildings.
I know
Being an
some
old,
I think we vote on one or two which are pretty flat. Just asking.
yeah, the library was a newer building.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that was, and I actually, you had an entry there, but I worked on the second floor addition to that library back 15 years ago probably. But there was no, trying to remember if we had an elevator in that project or not. But either way, that had a level grade entry to that building, so that was ADA accessible. But being an old campus, I'm sure that there are other instances where this would need to be addressed, as any institution has.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I think I'm good on the ramp. I wanted to focus some questions around the signage, if that's appropriate now. So you currently have at the ends of the driveway also two signs for Iona. What was the rationale behind adding this kind of third sign? And how do you think of it in terms of all the signage on 22? Pro forma for this, you would have three signs that say Iona. Is it your plan to keep all three, change some of those on the end to not say Iona anymore, to say something else, or what's the plan?
The end signs, and Mike, you can jump in if I'm saying anything incorrect. The end signs were historic signs from Concordia that have been there for a little over 100 years. They had said Concordia on them, and that was simply updated to say Iona. If there was no signage on those structures, there's no other reason that they would be there.
Right.
But they are historic structures. So it was a debate of if they're not signed, if there's no lettering on them, are they demolished, but they're historic, so they serve a purpose with its overall context with these buildings. So in my architectural opinion, I think they have to say the school names just because that was their original purpose. That was to name the institution on those was the original purpose of those. Again, the front of the building here also has a function for a signage to announce what the front door of this institution is. It's, being part of the building was, again, historic to place signage on there. It's hard to see, but in this frieze here,
Right.
which is the architectural detail, it actually says Concordia here in the building, right? That's not being proposed to be removed. That's part of the history of the building. But, there needs to be some acknowledgement that this is Iona University. This is the institution that's here now.
it's even more necessary if you're leaving the Concordia sign up there, because it could be confusing if that's all you had up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, on a related note, you've also added throughout the campus a number of banners on the lampposts.
I
So-
can't speak out of
So, I mean, which are signs. So I think what, I know I've talked to a number of neighbors in the area and other residents of the village, and I think what we're trying to understand is what is the overall plan for signage?
Right.
Because, it's compared to what was there when Concordia, was there, it strikes some as a bit of a sensory overload of signs. And so what we're trying to understand before we start approving new signs
Right.
is what is the overall plan for signage on the campus?
Hi, I'm Mike Smriglio with Iona. We currently don't have plans for each building on the site because we're assessing our needs and programming accordingly. Come 2 weeks from now, spring semester starts, and we are going to have our new health science building occupied. The grand opening is tomorrow. We did put a donor sign and the name of that building on the front of that as approved, but we don't have any further plans for signage at this point. I'm not saying that we'll never come back for signage, but we realized that we wanted our name in the front center. That building, which is called Feth Hall, is our welcoming, our handshake to whoever comes into the building. That's going to be our welcome center, and our nursing program, our health science receiving area for new students. So we felt that it was appropriate there. I think banners were put out of the excitement of purchasing the property back before I started back in August, so it predates me, but I do understand there was some excitement in wanting to get the Iona name out there. So
Well, it was also, excuse me, it was also expressed to us previously that one of the reasons the banners were put up is because they have the same types of banners on the new Rochelle campus. So if you drive up and down North Avenue, you see all the, the banners on all the lampposts, and I haven't been into Central Campus recently over there, but I assume there's a similar concept there. And what my concern is, and the concerns of others that I've spoken with, is that there might be and I understand you have a brand and you want to have uniformity of the brand, but the Bronxville campus is not the New Rochelle campus. And White Plains Road, that bisects the campus, is not North Avenue.
right.
So we are just trying to understand, we don't want the Bronxville campus of Iona to turn into the New Rochelle campus of Iona in terms of the signage and amount of signage.
And we understand that as well. We went across the front of the road and took down banners recently that were on that road, so it doesn't look like North Avenue. There are banners on light poles once you come onto the property. We're not married to those, but I believe this signage really helps identify the organization and does offer the handshake to people coming in. You mentioned the other signs earlier. I think Chris spoke to those very well, on the concrete pillars. That also serves as a landmark when driving by to help people know that they've arrived. So we don't have, to sum up, we don't have specific plans for additional signage. We know that if we were to recognize donors on any of those buildings, we can do so in a different fashion and not on the exterior of the building.
Yeah, and I should say, in fairness, that Concordia did have some banners on some of the lampposts, but not to the same extent that Iona has installed those on, it seems like, every single lamppost on the campus. I should also say for my own part that I am more sympathetic to the university having more flexibility in terms of what they do in the central part of campus as opposed to the parts of campus that face out onto White Plains Road and Tanglewild and the other public rights of way. I think that's where there's greater sensitivity. So I do appreciate the banners, and as another banner that came before us previously but was not approved was the banner that hangs in front of the conservatory, and that one is still a Concordia banner. It's the same blue banner. So I wonder whether there are any plans to bring a replacement for that banner before us at any point.
Sorry. So that application went to the DRC, and it was approved by the DRC, and then I believe what happened was we meant to come to the planning board for that conservatory sign, but Iona was reassessing the Feth Hall banners, which we have now eliminated, and so in that, it kind of got mistaken and not put back on a planning board agenda, but hopefully we can be here, and I'll work with Christina, and we can come back next month and try to get that sign on the conservatory. We did receive an area variance for that as well, as an area variance for 3 signs on White Plains Road for the Feth Hall sign.
Yeah, I think the philosophy, sir, and Mr. Taft can speak to this, but I think when Iona bought the campus, I think the building department understandably took the view that you clearly needed to remove, it was appropriate to remove the Concordia signs wherever they existed and replace those with Iona signs. Mm-hmm. And I think the driveway entrances fall into that category, and the Concordia Conservatory banner falls into that category.
Okay.
But, so if it was merely a matter of just replacing the Concordia signs with Iona signs, I think, there would be a lot more, it would be less controversial because the signs were already there. Concordia had them approved, throughout their history at some point.
Maybe, yeah. It's not clear.
Or not, but
Yeah.
the fact is they were there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but coming before us with new sign requests, we have to look at those not only, standing alone, but also we have to consider those in light of the fact that you've already replaced all of the existing Concordia signs with Iona signs. And I should also say, with respect to those coffin entrances, I think they're actually on both sides of White Plains Road, and I think you might have even put letters on one that didn't have any letters on it by the baseball field. So now, and each of those has 2 sides, of course. So you've got, each one of those is technically two signs. So you've got 4 of those on the west side of White Plains Road and 4 of those on the east side of White Plains Road already. So we're just trying to, and this discussion is made more complicated by the fact that the campus is in a residential zone of the village. So generally speaking, signage is not permitted. You can, on the residential streets, you can have your street address sign, but you're not supposed to be hanging signs or banners or things like that. So, we're considering this as a site plan application,
Right.
which it is, but technically speaking, the signage itself, as you know from the banners, is required to go to the zoning board for a variance.
Right, so, well, I guess, I understand what you're saying, but I would defer to Mr. Taft, but, I mean, from his memo, it seemed like there were no zoning issues with this application. So, from our standpoint, we are under the impression that we didn't need a variance for this sign, based on that direction.
Mr. Taft, could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, if it wasn't placed in the memo, it would have been an oversight, in light of what we're speaking about. And if the board found that it needed a variance, then, you would refer that to zoning. I think it is an issue with the number of signs. I know we are trying to work on some code changes which aren't in place at this point. So until that's been revised, we really can't speak to that. But that is another thing that we're trying to help with this property and, similar ones, to try and address this issue where it's in a residential zone, not in a commercial zone. So.
Yes. Yeah, because as you may recall with the banners, I think the planning board did not approve the banners, even though DRC, I think, had recommended approval.
Right.
And the planning board sent those to the zoning board.
Right, and we did receive.
Because the variance was needed. So we're kind of in the same situation here insofar as the new proposed sign is concerned. as we were with the
Right,
banners.
right.
Now,
So-
I'm not suggesting that, we're going to just, well, we have to decide what we're going to do, obviously,
Right.
but I don't think that we have the authority, we can grant a site plan approval for the work that's being done, on the entrance, and we can approve the site plan inclusive of the sign, but that, I don't think, is the final regulatory or board action of the village, and then send that to the zoning board. So that would be, one thing we could do,
Right.
assuming we were prepared to,
Right.
approve this.
Yes, I just want to make sure that if we're going back to the zoning board, we're going back for all the signs that are there, because when we went to the zoning board previously, it was just for the banners and a different ground sign that we proposed in front. Those coffin signs we were not directed to receive variances for those. So I just want to make sure if we need variances for those coffin signs, that we're getting them this
Yeah.
time.
Those have been there forever, so, I think it's, to call them grandfathered seems appropriate. One of the problems we have, and Paul, you sort of alluded to it, is that we need to develop an approach, a policy, and rules about signs that aren't commercial and aren't residential, because, there's not much guidance available to Iona about what you can and can't do. The commercial sign provisions in the code don't offer anything useful, because you don't have an awning or a window.
Right.
So,
A little bit on this. The Concordia campus, those three buildings that we're talking about here, and pretty much everything that we see along Route 22 is a historic structure. All those structures were built in between 1906 and 1890, in that range there. Along with those coffin signs that we're talking about now, which is obviously long before any of the zoning was even developed, right?
Sure.
Before any zoning codes were even implemented. And the signage that they have placed there on the light posts, as far as I'm aware, no additional banner holders were installed on light posts. Concordia, especially towards the end, were not replacing their banners if one was damaged. But those banner holders were all existing there. So I agree, Iona was very excited about being on that campus. They put up all banners where there was somewhere to hold them, right? Concordia banners may have not been there at that purchase time, but at some point they probably were. Otherwise, they wouldn't have paid that additional cost to install those pieces on those light poles. As far as I'm aware, all of those light pole banners that are visible from Route 22 have been removed. Only the ones inside of campus, which are not publicly visible, are remaining, which means the only signage that we're talking about now are the historic signage that has been there that predates code. So I would find it hard to say that these signs are not grandfathered in. I guess we could say that the front sign is an additional sign because we're not removing the limestone sign that says Concordia on the building. But I would argue that we can't remove that historically.
And when you put the name on the coffin signs, they had previously said in much finer letters, Concordia College, but they were replaced, and maybe, this might have been happening at the time when Iona was going from a college to a university, but was any thought given to having them say Iona College or Iona University in smaller, finer letters, like the ones that were on when Concordia was there? And the reason why I ask that is because the Iona right now is big and bold and in a number of places, and it kind of jumps out at people more.
Right. I was not part of that conversation, so I can't answer that, but you're correct that it did say Concordia.
Concordia College.
Did it say Concordia College?
Yes.
Concordia is a much longer word than Iona.
Yeah. So they were, but they were fine. They were smaller and finer. So they were less noticeable. So I think that's kind of also informing some of the concern about the amount of signage, because people are seeing all these things that maybe they didn't notice previously.
Right. Yeah, and we understand, and we heard some of the concerns from the design review committee, and that's why we took a step back, removed the banners from Feth Hall and the proposal for the banners on Feth Hall, and really, had Chris take a look and try to put a sign that would be a focal point and an entrance sign to the campus, but fits in with the existing architecture, as Chris explained, and, just really fits with the campus and is set back from the road to kind of, to give you that visual notification, but also to keep it farther from White Plains Road so it's not in your face, and we tried to be really cognizant of that.
And can you address the lighting of the sign?
Yes. So the sign has 3 LED uplights. When I say uplights, they are actually dark sky compliant. They have a shield on them, so it's only lighting the sign. And it's 3, they're mounted in the lawn. You can see it on the left there. There's 3 lights that point to the sign. Yeah. And those are, they're dark sky compliant, and they're from BK Lighting. It's a matte black fixture. It's a can that's about yay long and about that size diameter, with a shield on the end, so it has an angled lens on the end, and matte black. You're not going to see it in the landscape.
Yes.
Is there lighting on the coffin signs that, for Iona?
I don't think so.
Mr. Van Ness, any other questions or comments?
No.
Mr. Ching?
Nope.
Mr. Hayden?
No.
Mr. Taft, would you like to say anything else about this application based on your review?
I would say, as far as the scope of the project, it's a huge improvement to make it handicap accessible. That's great. The signage obviously is a little bit more complicated. It would seem to me that if they had a sort of a master plan for that, at least for the road front area, and see what the new code offers, or, go through the process of going zoning and then come. I think it may end up being a shorter thing, waiting for the code change. I don't know. That seems to be my feeling, but I could be wrong.
I would like, since the applicant is here tonight,
Yep.
I think we have enough information. I don't want to do what was done previously,
Yep.
which is to send them to the zoning board, to have them have to come back to us, assuming the zoning board approves this proposal.
Sure.
I would rather, in the interest of the applicant wanting to, you have a lot of things on the university's plate, to make a decision on this, yay or nay, and then if we decide to approve it, to send them to the zoning board to get the variance for what we approve, or if in the event that we reject it, then obviously they, go back to the drawing board and not go to zoning with this particular proposal.
Right. That's fine.
So I don't want to be, bouncing them around from board to board. I don't think that's in anyone's interest.
I agree.
Yeah.
So with that said, I guess at this point, why don't we open the public hearing? And if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this application, seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and we can discuss this as a board. So what does everyone think?
I think about the application in 2 pieces. I think the handicap accessible driveway is straightforward. It makes sense. I think it goes well with the plan, and I'm very supportive of that. With respect to the large sign in the front, I am trying to balance the needs of the university, that they have a new location, they need people to understand it is now Iona and no longer Concordia, but balancing that excitement and that need to also generate school spirit, whatever, with the neighborhood and it being a very residential neighborhood and not being oversigned. I do have concerns that on 22, if this sign is approved, you will have 5 different signs technically. The 2 coffins each have 2 comments about Iona and the centerpiece, which seems a bit much. And so I would be, I think, reticent to allow all of that to exist. If the desire is to have this centerpiece, then I'm not saying that we need to remove the coffin signs. I mean, the architecture, but possibly removing the signs to reduce the amount of Ionas on there. And the only other comment I would say on the interior signage, you have taken some of the flags off the posts on 22, but on Tanglewild, there used to be a lot of trees that provided coverage into the back of the campus and the dorms there. Those trees have been removed and replaced with lower branches, and there are a number of lighting posts back there as well, which still have flags, but are now much more visible to all the residents on Tanglewild, of which now they're looking onto more signage as well. And so that's another consideration, that it would help to understand the full comprehensive plan on some of your signs to kind of approve this going forward.
I would agree with Michael a lot in everything he said. My only addition would be I'm more in favor of the center sign. I think it's really good. You know, everyone that's going to a high school or college loves to have that as their welcome center. So I think that's probably the most important sign you have. And I like that sign. It's the number of extra signs that we have to be careful of giving everyone who lives right there. So I agree with Michael on that point. But the main sign, I really like what you're doing. I like how it's now handicap accessible without having stairs. That's really a smart idea.
And Albert, would you be amenable to some other form of signage on those entrance
Yes.
coffin?
Yes, if that would help.
Columns.
If you want to make it, if they would agree to make it smaller. If they would agree to make it smaller. Yes, I would be amenable to having those coffin signs have smaller print, smaller font, whatever it is. Here you go, Michael.
Mr. Hayden?
There's very little guidance around signage for other than the central business district. And if you go to the residential areas, I guess signs just simply aren't allowed. Although if you go across from Iona, there's a guy who has flags and banners and inflatables right there on 22, and we haven't done anything about that. And I think, in looking at the signs, I think about the character of the neighborhood. Now, everyone says this is a residential area. Well, it may be, but from Tanglewood forward, it's Iona until you get out of Bronxville. And I don't think the sign in the front, whether it's the coffins or the central sign, are inconsistent with the residential feeling of Bronxville, because that's sort of ends at Tanglewild, and I don't think any of these signs are really doing anything other than giving drivers on 22 a view of what they're driving past. I think the sign in front is an improvement over the banners, which I sort of liked them because they were festive, but probably not as appropriate as the sign in front. And I like the Iona coffin signs. I don't find a need to make them smaller or longer. Again, I think, given their location and given their historic nature, it's hard to come up with a rationale for what I think would be, I mean, the objections are aesthetic, right? And the design review committee, I would defer to them on the aesthetics of it. And I would view our role more as trying to keep the nature of the village and the nature of the neighborhoods unsullied by whatever we decide offends us. And I think given the location of these signs and the separation from the residential areas, I guess I'm in favor of what's been proposed.
So let me ask you a question. For the coffin signs, you don't think that any changes to those, you would be prepared to support this, to approve it, and not make any changes to the coffin signs?
Yes.
Have those left as they are now?
Right, for two reasons. Number one, I like them, but that's the less important reason. And number two, I do defer to the design review committee because I don't think my aesthetic sense is of much use to the board or the village of Bronxville.
I think based on the DRC minutes, I think they were looking to us to give guidance as to how many signs and
Yeah.
whether the coffin sign should be modified or should stay or go.
Did they mention modifying the signs or just the number?
They have a comment about it.
The DRC still feels that these signs should be removed, but defers to the planning board to make a final decision.
The coffin signs.
This is for the coffin signs. And then, in addition, the DRC asked about the removal of the signs on the lampposts. No consideration for the removal of those signs seems to be enacted. DRC defers to planning to levy a decision. So it's kind of, so I think, it is important to note, though, that the DRC was supportive of this sign and thought that it was, in its own right, it's something that they actually support. And certainly that it to them was an improvement over the banners, or there was another intermediate proposal, I think, of that so-called floating sign, which I think people weren't crazy about that either. So this is I think of the three, this is the one that's garnered the most support from DRC, it's fair to say. So where does that leave us? For myself, I am supportive. I am supportive of the driveway work. I think the DRC also wanted to see a sample of the pavers, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something that, to the extent we progress further, we'll need to get that to them. I'm prepared. I would be prepared to support this new main sign. But I do feel that we need to take another look at some of the other signage on White Plains Road to see if there's maybe a way we can kind of dial that back a little bit. And I just wonder whether, the applicant has any thoughts about how that might be able to be done. And I guess specifically I'm thinking about maybe the coffin signs. For example, do they need to have Iona on both sides of the coffin, or could Iona only be on one side of the coffin, just as an example? Or could Iona be replaced with a finer, a smaller, finer lettering instead of the bold letters that are on there now?
Thank you.
At one point, those coffin signs did say Concordia on both sides. When we replaced the limestone, there were pins there for lettering on both sides. But when the letters deteriorated on the side, Concordia put up bushes. So they were able to piecemeal the broken letters to create one sign on one side. And then they planted bushes and flowers on the opposite side.
Yes.
So if you're going northbound, obviously the sign faces you, and when you're going southbound, so they moved the letters around. So when we redid the landscaping around them, we did notice that there's pins on both sides and some broken letters and a highlight. So we replaced those blue stones because the pins were rusted. And we just replaced new pins and the lettering that was back there. You are correct, the lettering was a little finer. I think those letters there are now 1.5 inches or 2, and the Concordia ones were thinner just due to the number of letters. But it's the same color and same font, just, I guess not font, but thicker lettering.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that are there now, they just say Iona.
Right.
So they're taller and bolder.
Yeah, they were meant for centering and
Yes,
and that.
yeah.
Anything finer or smaller probably wouldn't be even worth putting there, so they were the same height as the Concordia letters, they're just a little thicker.
So it sounds like it would not be unprecedented, or it would be possible, for example, and actually you make a good point about, depending on what direction you're coming in, if you're coming, if you're coming southbound, that maybe there could be, you could say Iona on the north-facing side, and then if you're coming northbound, it could say Iona on the north-facing side, but that the other side of those coffin could be left blank and landscaped.
Right.
So that the signage is only on one side. And then, you would know that you're coming to Iona, you would see it, but then once you get beyond it, then you would see potentially this new main sign at that point.
Correct.
In the center of the lawn, and then, so it would serve the purpose of then, alerting you to the fact that this is, you're coming into the Iona campus area.
I find that reasonable. We just spoke quickly, and we find that to be reasonable. What we would be open to is if we have approval here without requiring additional zoning or planning board meetings, we would be open to either removing one side or modifying those letters to be smaller and saying Iona University. And we can come back for a separate meeting for that discussion, but hinged on, this project here gets approval, which I think from the discussion here that there's no issue with what we're proposing in the plans here. It's the context that we're talking about. And the context, I think we can address with either removing the lettering on one side of those coffins or changing the height of those letters or what it exactly says, Iona University versus Iona. That discussion is somewhat separate but important.
Yes.
I think that's a good compromise, is the one-sided sign.
Yes.
I think that makes
I
sense.
completely agree.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you think of that? Is it still too much to, if we got rid of, basically the interior letters on the coffins as you're going in, would that,
I would still prefer if I'd approve the center wall, that there is no signage whatsoever at the coffins. That would be my, I think, aesthetically
They just look like
appropriate.
cement benches, though. I mean, they're sort of odd.
No, but I think a lot of I think a lot of entrances to large campuses or whatever do have, these kind of setting blocks or to frame an entrance. I don't think every single one of these needs signs is my contextual, but I think that is a reasonable compromise from where I am versus what the desire of the university is to put its name out and trying to take into consideration the residents and the amount of signage on the campus.
and if we were to do something with the coffin entrances on the west side of White Plains Road, I'm mindful that we have identical ones on the east side of White Plains Road. So I'm just wondering, there could be a knock-on effect on what we do on the other side of the road. I mean, the concern, obviously, the east side of White Plains Road is not the main entrance to campus, but you've still got two sets of these coffin pillars.
Correct, because it's framing, those coffins, just to your point there, those coffins were framing Route 22, not the entrance to campus, right? So the entrance to campus on Concordia Drive only has it on one side, right? Just like Rose Avenue only has it on one side. They're flanking each other on 22, so you have them there. So it's coming into campus on 22. So you have that portion heading north and south on 22 is announcing that portion of 22, you're in the Concordia campus, because Concordia's on both sides.
Right, but I thought both of the ones on the east side of White Plains Road also had Iona on both sides.
Yes.
of the-
You know, I'm just making a point of, I went back a little bit, but yeah, you're correct, yes.
Right.
And so that, what was happening, what would be happening on the western side would be mirrored on the eastern side.
Right, okay. So okay, got it. So we would, if we would say to remove the letters on one side, on the interior sides, on the west side, we would do the same thing, you would do the same thing on the east side.
We would be design consistent for that.
So it would be consistent, right, yeah, okay.
Paul has a...
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul.
Yes, I think as far as zoning enforcement, if they were to remove the inner portions of the coffin, I would consider that, and then add the one that they're proposing, that it's not it's not more non-conforming. So it would sort of be a swap. So if they were to do that, I wouldn't feel that they would need to go to zoning, for the
You'd see it as sort of
signs.
grandfathering from the Concordia practice.
Right, you're not adding any higher number of signs.
Right.
Because they're taking two out.
Well, we'd be taking four out, because we're taking two out on each side, so,
Yeah.
and then we're adding one.
So that would be my opinion on that,
Yes,
if that helps you.
yeah,
I agree with that.
yeah,
That's a very fair compromise.
yes, yeah.
For my owner.
Okay, well, any other thoughts or comments before we try to cobble together a motion here? And would someone like to take a stab?
I'll give it a shot.
At a motion?
I'll give it a shot. I move we approve the site plan for the entrance of Theth Hall, conditioned on the removal of the interior Iona signs on the coffin pedestals, or whatever they're called,
The 4 coffin
the
pedestals.
4 coffin pedestals.
I would second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Application
Thank you.
approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And good job in the field, too. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Hi,
Okay.
More people. They just don't show up.
Those are just signs, the DRC.
I didn't get any stuff on that, did you?
All right. On to the rest of the agenda for tonight. We have a couple more items.
Saw that.
The first one, hopefully these will, we can move through these fairly quickly. The first one is the sign application for New York Langone Health. The DRC has recommended approval of this sign application. The lettering was slightly larger than permitted, but looking at the location of the sign and in the round, they thought it was not unacceptably large and thought it could be, I think it was 2 3/4 inches higher than what's permitted. So do I have a motion to accept the recommendation of the DRC and approve the New York Langone Health sign.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and the last one is the awning application for New York Roadshow sports cards and memorabilia. The DRC recommended approval of this. There was some question during the DRC meeting as to whether this was the legal name of the business, which I understand that was confirmed shortly after the meeting. So on the basis that that is indeed the legal name, the DRC recommended approval of this application. So do I have a motion to accept the recommendation of the DRC and approve the New York Roadshow sports cards and memorabilia awning?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And that is all for the substantive applications. The next meeting is February 8th, 2023. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.